She slapped her. In front of everyone, because she thought a quiet black woman didn't belong in first class. What she didn't know, that nobody owned the entire airline. The afternoon sun glinted off the sleek silver body of the MorganJet LX-7 as it waited on the private tarmac. The luxury aircraft, known for its whisper-quiet cabin and custom Italian leather seats, stood like a promise of perfection. Inside, ambient jazz drifted through the air, mingling with the clink of champagne flutes and the subtle aroma of bergamot. This wasn't just air travel, it was curated prestige at 35,000 feet. Boarding was underway, and passengers floated in with the ease of people who'd never known the word inconvenience. Silk scarves, custom suits, Rolex glints, everything screamed comfort and control, and then came her. Dressed in a tailored navy mobile blazer, matching slacks and low heels, she didn't draw attention, she deflected it. Her posture was upright but unassuming, her steps precise but quiet. Her name was Danielle Morgan, and while no one recognized her, they were sitting inside her legacy. This was her jet, her airline, her empire. She could have arrived with a team, could have worn a designer label stamped in gold, could have had security clear the lounge and the runway, but that's not how Danielle operated. This was one of her stealth checks, surprise inspections she conducted herself, flying among her own passengers, unseen. And today, she would be seen. Just not the way she expected. At the cabin entrance stood Lauren Reed, lead flight attendant. Sharp cheekbones, even sharper instincts. She scanned each boarding pass and welcomed each VIP with a smile so polished it practically gleamed. "Mr. Rayburn! Mrs. Rayburn! Champagne already waiting at your seats!" she beamed. "Welcome back, Senator LeBlanc," she added to another. But when Danielle stepped forward, "Welcome aboard," Lauren said flatly. No smile, no eye contact. Her gaze skimmed Danielle's carry-on. Neutral-toned leather, understated, no brand name, then drifted briefly to her minimalist earrings. Coordinated but not expensive, Lauren mentally noted. Definitely not a regular VIP. Danielle offered a polite nod, unfazed, and proceeded to seat 1A. That's when the pattern started. Lauren made her way down the aisle, tray in hand, cheerfully offering orange juice, mimosas, even hand-folded cloth napkins. She skipped 1A entirely, didn't even glance Danielle's way. It wasn't a mistake, it was a message. Danielle didn't react, she just observed. Nearby, a younger couple, early 30s, new money, watched Danielle closely. The woman leaned over and whispered, "She doesn't really look first class, does she?" Her partner smirked. Maybe she married into it. The cabin around Danielle buzzed with coded glances and passive exclusion. The social architecture of the wealthy was being rebuilt, row by row, and she was being edited out. A few moments later, Lauren returned, this time offering hot towels. Again, she skipped Danielle. Danielle raised an eyebrow, then looked to her left, where a well-dressed older gentleman was watching everything with calm interest, salt and pepper beard, a cashmere scarf tucked neatly under his blazer. "First time flying MorganJet?" he asked, voice warm. Danielle turned to him with a slight smile. "No. I've been on a few of these." He nodded slowly. "Thought so. You've got the posture of someone who doesn't need the attention to prove she belongs." Danielle held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. "Appreciate that. I'm Frederick, retired Air Force. Once worked for a certain woman who started a company just like this, built it from the ground up, quietly, fiercely." Danielle's smile grew faintly. "Sounds like someone I'd like to meet." "Oh, I suspect you already know her better than you let on," he said, eyes twinkling. Danielle looked back down at her tablet, hiding a grin. She had always respected people who saw deeper. But not everyone did. Lauren returned once more, this time to check passenger bags stored under the seats. As she passed Danielle's row, her expression tightened. She reached down and tugged slightly on Danielle's bag, as if double-checking its positioning, then stood up and moved on without a word. It was unnecessary, just another microaggression. Danielle's fingers tightened slightly on her tablet. She thought briefly of her mother, who'd worked as a housekeeper for 28 years and once told her, "People won't always see your worth, but you better never forget it." That memory flickered through her as she turned to the window. She didn't need to raise her voice. she didn't need validation. But she would make sure they remembered this flight. Danielle adjusted her seatbelt and tapped quietly on her tablet, reviewing itinerary notes for an upcoming investor call. But her concentration wavered. Lauren had made no effort to return with water or even acknowledge her presence, despite already passing her row 3 separate times. The entire first-class cabin had been served. Every glass full, every smile broad, except for hers. When Lauren did glance her way, it wasn't with apology. It was with veiled annoyance, as if Danielle's very existence was inconvenient. Danielle was used to being underestimated. She had spent a lifetime walking into rooms where people assumed she was the assistant, the translator, the guest, never the one who signed the checks. But this was different. There was a sharpness to Lauren's dismissiveness. It wasn't just about Danielle's appearance or demeanor. It was about power, or, rather, Lauren's need to assert it over someone she believed had none. Across the aisle, the young couple from earlier snickered as Lauren leaned in and whispered something to them. The woman giggled. "Some people really will do anything for a free upgrade," she said, not so quietly. Danielle kept her eyes on the tablet, but her jaw clenched. A few minutes later, Danielle shifted in her seat to stretch her legs slightly into the aisle. Lauren, returning from the galley with a tray of still glass waters, saw the movement and deliberately chose not to step around it. Instead, her heel connected sharply with Danielle's shin. The tray jolted, and 3 glasses tipped forward, sending a splash of cold water across Danielle's lap and onto the floor. Gasps erupted nearby. A businessman 3 rows back sat up straighter. Mrs. Rayburn looked over her glasses. The young woman next to her muttered, "Finally, maybe now she'll move." Lauren took a dramatic step back and clutched the tray with exaggerated horror. "Ma'am," she exclaimed loudly, "you need to keep your legs out of the aisle. You've caused a mess." Danielle calmly looked down at the water soaking her slacks, then up at Lauren's tense face. Her voice was smooth, almost quiet, but every syllable landed with weight. "Actually," she said, "you walked into me." Lauren's smile strained. "We all have rules here, ma'am, and everyone is expected to respect them, including you." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "I've asked for nothing except basic courtesy, but you've made your position very clear." Lauren leaned in slightly, her voice sharp beneath the surface sweetness. "If you can't follow instructions, I can have you reseated in the back. We do have policies for passengers who disrupt cabin order." Danielle blinked slowly. "Would you like to check the passenger list before continuing this performance?" At that, Lauren's face reddened. She straightened abruptly and turned on her heel. "Grace," she barked, calling the junior flight attendant from the galley. Grace, a woman in her early 20s, nervous but kind, appeared immediately. Lauren jabbed a finger toward 1A. "Escort her to the back. Now." Grace froze. Her eyes darted between Danielle and Lauren. She hesitated, visibly torn, then softly asked, "Should we maybe check the manifest?" Lauren's voice dropped into a hiss. "I said escort her." Danielle spoke without raising her tone. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing, especially in front of so many witnesses." Lauren scoffed. "Witnesses don't matter if they all agree with me." Danielle glanced around the cabin. Some passengers looked away awkwardly. A few whispered behind their champagne glasses. One man, a sharp-suited executive in row 3C, watched intently, frowning. Grace stepped forward, her posture uncertain. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "I'm going to ask you to come with me. Just until we sort this out." Danielle remained seated. "I won't be moving, but you're welcome to call whoever you need." Lauren's voice rang through the cabin. "Last chance, ma'am. Move now or I'm calling security." Danielle set her tablet aside, folded her hands in her lap, and met Lauren's eyes. "Then call them." It wasn't just a refusal, it was a declaration. Lauren turned in a storm of flustered indignation and disappeared toward the front. The hum of voices swelled behind her. The businessman leaned toward Danielle. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Danielle nodded politely. "Just a misunderstanding. I'm sure it'll be resolved." Lauren returned moments later, flushed, phone in hand, barking at someone through gritted teeth. "Yes, right now, she's in seat 1A. No, I don't care who approved it. She's refusing to move." Danielle quietly reached for her own phone and typed a brief message. One tap. Sent. The air shifted. Passengers felt it, even if they didn't understand it. Lauren raised her voice again, clearly hoping to sway the audience of onlookers. We have policies for a reason, and some people think they can ignore them just because they feel entitled. The young woman from earlier chimed in, voice gleeful. Exactly, she's clearly in the wrong seat. Danielle said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was strategic, lethal. Grace looked visibly uncomfortable. She stood awkwardly near the cockpit door, her fingers trembling. She glanced toward the manifest clipped beside the captain's seat, then back at Danielle. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but Lauren caught her eye and shook her head. Danielle watched the interaction calmly. She turned to the businessman again. Would you mind pressing the call button for me? He did, instantly. Lauren returned, glaring. What now? Danielle tilted her head. Since you won't bring me water, perhaps someone else can. The businessman added, Frankly, I've watched you serve the entire cabin, except this woman. Are you really going to pretend this is about policy? Lauren turned red. Sir, I suggest you stay out of it. He narrowed his eyes. I suggest you speak to her with the same tone you've used for everyone else. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A man 3 rows back pulled out his phone and started recording, subtly at first, then openly. Another did the same. Lauren saw them. Her confidence cracked. Danielle leaned forward slightly, calm as ever. This will be the moment they remember. I hope you're ready for it. Lauren took one final breath, then lost control. Enough, she barked. You're done. And with one sudden, impulsive motion, she slapped Danielle across the face. The sound echoed. The cabin froze. No one spoke, no one moved. The man filming gasped aloud. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. The businessman half stood, fury on his face. Danielle didn't react. She sat still, her cheek pink, her expression unreadable. Then she turned slowly, looked Lauren in the eye, and said in a voice calm enough to chill the room, You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Silence gripped the cabin like a vice. The sound of the slap still echoed in everyone's ears, hanging in the air like smoke. Danielle sat motionless, her posture steady, her hands folded in her lap. Her cheek, now faintly red, was the only sign she had just been struck. Lauren stood over her, chest heaving, lips trembling, somewhere between righteous fury and the first flicker of fear. No one said a word. No one dared to. Even the passengers, who had whispered earlier, now looked away, as if ashamed to be part of it. Then Danielle slowly turned her head, locked eyes with Lauren, and spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, deadly quiet. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Lauren blinked, once, then twice. Her voice cracked. Excuse me? Danielle didn't repeat herself. She didn't have to. Instead, she leaned back in her seat, reached for her phone, and tapped something without even looking at the screen. One click. Sent. At the front of the cabin, Grace stood frozen near the cockpit, her face pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the passenger manifest. The tension was suffocating. Then, a chime echoed through the cabin, followed by the soft click of the cockpit door opening. The captain stepped out. He looked straight ahead at Lauren, his expression unreadable. Lauren, he said flatly, you need to step aside, right now. Lauren blinked again. What? She said, laughing nervously. No, Captain, this passenger, she's been... But the captain didn't let her finish. I just received a call from MorganJet Executive Operations. Effective immediately, you are to vacate your station. You are relieved of duty pending further review. The whisper spread through the cabin like a spark in dry grass. Passengers turned in their seats. Phones came out. Someone gasped audibly. Lauren looked around, her face draining of color. There's a mistake, she stammered. This woman, she's caused a disruption. She doesn't even belong in... The captain raised a hand. She does belong. In fact, she owns the seat you're standing over, and she owns the plane. He turned his gaze to Danielle. Miss Morgan, we're sorry. We had no idea. Lauren's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. The color was gone from her face entirely. Danielle stood up, slow and composed. She straightened her blazer, adjusted her collar, and looked around the cabin. Every eye was on her now, and for the first time, they were seeing her. "My name," she said, her voice filling the space without force, "is Danielle Morgan. I'm the founder and CEO of MorganJet. This airline, this fleet, every one of these jets bears my signature. And what happened here today?" She turned her gaze back to Lauren. "Will never happen again." Lauren staggered back a step. I didn't know," she whispered. You didn't say. You didn't ask," Danielle said, cutting her off. "You assumed. You judged. You humiliated me in front of everyone here. You physically assaulted a passenger without provocation, and you did all of it from a place of arrogance, not policy." Lauren's knees looked unsteady. She tried to speak again, but Danielle stepped forward. "Save it," she said quietly. "This isn't the part where you apologize. This is the part where you leave." 2 security officers entered the cabin through the service door, flanking the aisle. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. One of them gently gestured toward the rear galley. Lauren's hands trembled as she reached for her badge. Please, this isn't fair." Danielle's voice remained even. "Fair? You had every chance to treat me like every other passenger, but you chose to escalate. You chose violence. You chose this." Lauren's lips quivered. "Miss Morgan, please, just don't ruin my career." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "You ruined it yourself." The officers escorted Lauren away as passengers parted silently to let them pass. A few shook their heads. Some filmed. Others simply looked at Danielle with wide eyes. The young couple from earlier, now dead silent, couldn't even lift their gaze. Grace stood by the cockpit, still holding the manifest. Danielle walked over to her. "You knew something wasn't right," Danielle said gently. Grace nodded, tears brimming. "I wanted to speak up. I hesitated." Danielle's tone softened. "But you didn't follow through, not when it counted. Let this be a lesson. Silence protects the wrong people." Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Danielle looked at the captain. "Please continue the flight. I have no further need for escalation." "Yes, Miss Morgan," he replied. The cabin slowly resumed motion. Passengers sat back. Conversations resumed. Quiet, respectful, a new mood settled into the air. A heavy one. Danielle returned to her seat, but before she did, the older gentleman, Greer, gave her a small nod of respect. She nodded back. "Thank you for seeing." He smiled. Always did. The businessman leaned over. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, I apologize. I didn't say anything earlier, but I should have." Danielle nodded. "Then learn from it. Next time, say something." He held her gaze, then looked down, humbled. The rest of the flight passed in silence. At landing, a sleek black SUV waited at the base of the private stair. As Danielle stepped off the plane, the crew lined up in apology. One of the MorganJet executives stood with a tablet, ready to conduct the immediate investigation Danielle had triggered from the sky. She stopped just long enough to leave a note in Grace's hand, a handwritten one. It read, "Let your courage come sooner next time. But I saw it. Don't waste it." As Danielle got into the SUV, cameras at the private terminal tried to capture her exit. By then, the story was already online. A video clip, grainy and unsteady, showed Lauren slapping Danielle. It showed the captain's face when he stepped out. It showed Danielle calmly revealing her identity. And then, the hashtags came. Danielle Morgan. Respect takes flight. She owned the plane. It was everywhere within hours. Later that night, MorganJet released a formal statement. "We do not tolerate discrimination, humiliation, or abuse, regardless of who is watching, or who isn't." And Danielle? She returned to her penthouse suite in Manhattan, where a press request from CNN, Forbes, and the New York Times were already waiting. She didn't rush to answer. She poured herself a glass of still water, sat on the balcony, and whispered to herself, this was never about revenge. It's about resetting the standard. The next morning, MorganJet's inbox was flooded. Not with complaints, but with thank yous. From passengers who had seen the video, from crew members at other airlines, from mothers, students, and veterans who had once been looked over, talked down to, or outright humiliated in premium spaces they'd paid for. Danielle read dozens of them before breakfast. One said, "I watched you take that slap and not break. I watched you hold every ounce of power without raising your voice. And for the first time in years, I felt seen." Another said, "Thank you for showing my daughter that dignity doesn't need volume, it just needs truth." That afternoon, Danielle walked into a press conference, not for press, but for purpose. She stood at a podium inside MorganJet's New York headquarters, facing a room of reporters, employees, and camera crews. Her message wasn't about the incident. It was about the shift. "We are redefining what luxury means," she said, "and it starts with how we treat people, not when they look like they belong, but especially when someone assumes they don't." Applause followed, but Danielle raised a hand. This wasn't about a seat. This was about who gets to feel safe, welcomed, and human. We are not just upgrading our planes, we are upgrading our culture. Behind her, the company unveiled a new campaign, Respect Takes Flight, a commitment to retrain every MorganJet crew member, not just on policy, but on perception. It included new whistleblower protections, an internal bias reporting system, and Danielle's personal initiative, a leadership fellowship named after her late mother, geared toward young women of color entering aviation leadership. Then she paused, her voice softened. "When I was 10, my mother was denied boarding because the clerk said her shoes were too worn for first class. We never forgot, and now no woman should ever carry that kind of shame into the sky again." Danielle invited Grace to the stage. The junior flight attendant stood there, stunned, not knowing what to expect. Danielle smiled. "You didn't act perfectly, but you paused, you felt something, and next time you'll know how to act faster. You still have a lot to learn, but I'd like to help you learn it, starting with your promotion to first-class service lead." The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers. Grace teared up, nodded shakily, and hugged Danielle. A photo of that moment would circle the internet for days, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Later that evening, Danielle returned to her apartment. No cameras, no staff, just her and the quiet. She stood by the window watching the city lights flicker far below. In her hand was a letter. Handwritten, no name, just 5 lines. "I saw what happened. I used to treat people like that too. I think I just needed to see myself from the outside. You made that possible. I'm changing. Thank you." Danielle folded the letter and placed it inside a leather journal. The one where she kept stories that didn't need headlines but needed to be remembered. She poured a glass of tea and exhaled. This wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. And now, it was about what came next. Later, MorganJet released its first ever internal disciplinary report to the public. Lauren's name was listed along with the official action: terminated for misconduct and permanently barred from re-employment in any MorganJet-affiliated partner program. But it didn't stop there. Danielle had insisted the public deserved transparency, not just about justice, but about progress. The company published its full diversity audit, every employee training protocol, every complaint channel, and for the first time, passengers felt like they mattered beyond the ticket price. In the same press release, Danielle made an unexpected announcement. Grace, who once stood trembling in that cabin, would be joining a new 5-year program led directly by the CEO's office, training future hospitality leaders. "We're not just hiring diversity," Danielle wrote, "we're growing it." A few months later, Grace appeared in a company spotlight video, confident, clear-eyed, and poised. "I almost stayed silent that day," she said, "and I'll never do that again. Miss Morgan didn't just save me, she made me someone worth following." Weeks later, Danielle boarded another flight, different destination, same airline. As she stepped into the cabin, the energy was different. The new lead attendant greeted her with a warm, professional smile, posture upright but not performative. "Welcome aboard, Miss Morgan. It's an honor to have you with us." Danielle returned the smile. "It's an honor to be welcomed." She took her seat. This time, there were no glances, no whispers, just quiet competence and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Later that month, Danielle was invited to speak at a leadership summit for women in aviation. She stood on stage, no script in hand, and began with a question. What does power look like when it's not loud? She paused. Let the silence land. I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like not lowering your voice when someone disrespects you, and also not raising it just to be heard. It looks like holding your ground with grace. It looks like understanding the difference between reacting and leading. The audience sat in stillness, many nodding, some tearing up. She continued, true leadership isn't just about results or rank. It's about tone, posture, presence, and sometimes it's about staying in your seat when everyone's trying to move you out of it. Applause rose, slow and steady. Outside the venue, a mother stood with her teenage daughter, both dressed in navy. They waited until the crowd thinned before approaching Danielle. The girl looked shy. The mother said, "She saw the clip of you on the plane, watched it 5 times. She wants to be a pilot." Danielle knelt slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "You won't just fly planes, you'll change how people are treated when they walk onto them. You ready for that?" The girl nodded. Later that night, back at her apartment, Danielle stood by the window as city lights blinked below like constellations. She thought of her mother again, the housekeeper who once told her, how you treat people on your worst day matters more than how you shine on your best. And then her phone buzzed, a message from a MorganJet intern. No subject line, just one line of text. "Because of you, I didn't stay silent today." Danielle stared at the words for a moment, then typed back, "Then it was worth it." If this story made you feel something, anger, pride, maybe even courage, ask yourself this. What would you have done on that flight? Would you have spoken up, filmed, looked away? Because the truth is, we all board planes, we all enter rooms, and sooner or later, we all take a seat where someone thinks we don't belong. So when that moment comes, don't shrink, don't fold, and don't let them move you, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay seated.